Welcome to the Tough Love Club podcast. This podcast is for people who are tired of lying to themselves. I talk about discipline, faith, fitness, relationships, and anything else that will help you become more self-aware so you can refine yourself. Because the truth is, we can all do better in a variety of areas, and too many people lack a solid friend in their life who is willing to be honest with them. So that's what I'm here for. So today, we are talking about going into the new year. Whether you set New Year's resolutions or not doesn't change the fact that the new year always feels like a mental reset for us. And I think that goes for everybody. I feel that way, even though I am not necessarily somebody who sets New Year's resolutions. I do set goals for myself, but when I shifted from being somebody who struggles so much with her fitness and with yo-yoing her weight, the all or nothing mindset, when I switched from being that person to being who I am now, the biggest shift came down to a change in my personal standards, not really the goals that I set. Because people who succeed at achieving a goal and people who fail at achieving a goal, they both have the same goal, but they have different standards. That's really where your effort needs to be. So what I wanted to talk about today is if you are somebody who's truly trying to change this year, you really want to become a different person, and maybe you're not even thinking that far yet. Maybe you're thinking that you want to finally lose the weight. You're tired of yo-yoing. That's your center focus. That's what's been consuming you. You have to back up behind that physical goal and recognize that your true goal is to become a person who makes different decisions on a daily basis. I don't mean big decisions, although that could be affected as well. I'm talking about the little daily decisions, about whether or not you're going to prep your food to begin with, whether or not you're going to actually hit your meals throughout the day, whether or not you're going to try to get in more movement. I mean, the little things, like as cliche as it sounds, how far you park away from the store. Like, you have to become a person who operates differently. Your operating system needs to be updated, we'll say. So there's a few things I wanted to go through. Okay, if you truly want to change this year, here is what I think that you should focus on. First and foremost, your identity is going to have to shift. So often people say they want to lose X amount of weight. I want to fit into this swimsuit, or like whatever. You have these superficial goals, which just because they're called a superficial goal doesn't mean it's wrong to have that goal. It just objectively is a superficial goal if it's about, how you look, how you feel, like the outward appearance. That's fine. I have those goals as well, of course, literally what I do for a living. However, your identity has to change as well. An identity shift comes down to, it's a change in who you believe you are or who you're allowed to be, and how you should behave when nobody is watching. That's the difference. It's not just doing things the right way part of the time. It's if you didn't have a goal, if there was no pressure being put on you, if you whatever X factor that might keep you accountable, if that wasn't there, how do you operate at a baseline level? Because the things that I do that keep me in this current physique are things that I would do whether I was focused on physique goals or not. Like, I move my body more because that's what a healthy person does. I'm the type of person who moves around. I eat certain food because that's what a healthy, athletic person does. Who are you trying to identify as? If you still identify as somebody who struggles with consistency, has this all or nothing mindset, like, those beliefs become so deeply ingrained that many people don't actually believe that they can get the result because they're identifying as the person who operates this way. It's like, you want this result, but you still identify as somebody who, when life gets really busy or chaotic, you just put fitness on the back burner. Like, that's not an option if you truly want to achieve the result, because there's never going to be a good time for you to pursue a weight loss goal. There's never an ideal time where there's nothing on the calendar. There's no stress in your life. There aren't kids' games all the time. You don't have a busy job. Like, your emotions have to be right. Like, there's no perfect time frame to try to achieve this. And even if that is true, even if there were, if there was a period of time throughout the year where you're like, you could lock in, right? Like, if I didn't have this going on, I could lock in. If I didn't have that going on, I could lock in. Let's say that did exist. Okay. That's not going to be your reality forever. So you're not equipping yourself to handle obstacles as they naturally pop up. I say this to you all the time. It's actually advantageous for you to pursue a goal during a chaotic time period because you have to learn how to stick with the plan while chaos is happening. If it's the busiest time of the school year for your kids, if it's the busiest time of work, if you have all this travel coming up, okay, cool. You should try to learn how to stick with the plan during that time frame so that you're equipped to handle anything life throws your way because you're not thinking beyond this short-term goal. That's the problem. If you just think about, I'll be happy when, which you got to stop doing that. I'll be happy when I lose the weight. I'll be happy when I can fit in everything in my closet. I'll be happy if I look the way I want to look on vacation. What are you going to do after that? What all you're doing when you set, like, one, I do agree with having a deadline to your goal because it keeps you accountable to like consistency. However, if that's where your thought process ends for your future goals is just this immediate weight loss goal you have in front of you, you're not going to truly try to change your behavior at a baseline level. There's two things that you're working on at once. Whenever every single person, people don't try and fix their habits until it's time to lose weight, right? So every single person, when they start a weight loss journey, they're actually working towards two different goals simultaneously, but they don't necessarily view it that way initially. You're working on changing your lifestyle and you're working on achieving the physical goal. Those are two different things that you're now working on simultaneously. And what that means is that there's certain baseline behaviors that need to change. There's things that need to happen in order for you to even have the foundation in which you can achieve this goal. But that also needs to be done so you can keep the results once you get them. The reason that you yo-yo, maybe you're really good at losing weight and then gaining it back, and you lose the weight and then you gain it back. That's a lot of people that come to me. Like, I can lose the weight. I can stick with it long enough to lose the weight, but I don't know how to enter maintenance. Well, that's because you don't actually enter maintenance. You go back to what you were doing before. And that's why the pendulum swings back and forth. And I could do a whole separate conversation on why that's so common. But right now we're talking about your identity. When your identity of who you believe yourself to be and your behavior, the new habits, when those two things conflict, identity always wins because that's your baseline foundational thought process, your standard operating procedures, the decisions that you make consistently. And one of the biggest things I see holding people back, and this is one of my next points, is that the moment they get uncomfortable, they stop trying. You're not good at putting effort forth during uncomfortable periods. So we'll talk about that in a second. But as far as one of the things you need to focus on to truly change this year, shifting your identity. So you start having these thoughts instead of, I'm doing this because I'm trying to hit this goal, or I'm doing this because I'm tracking, I'm doing this because my coach tells me to. It's, no, I'm not the type of person who overeats. That's my thought process. Whenever I am met with temptation to give into snacking, if I can even excuse it, right? By saying, okay, if I eat that, it's not going to affect the scale. If I eat extra, I already had some of these Russian tea cakes, which are 100 calories a pop. If I eat another one or two, that's not a big deal. I can lose the weight again. I can, even if I gain weight, I'm not gaining weight from that. No big deal. Okay. That's not my personal standard though. My personal standard, my identity is that I am somebody who controls her impulses. I'm not somebody who easily gives into an impulse. I decide whether or not I'm going to do it. I don't give in to the craving. That's the new identity, is I'm not somebody who does that. I'm not the type of person who lets others dictate or influence their behavior. This is for those of you who have lots of friends who like to go out and eat, friends who like to drink on every occasion. Every form of entertainment is surrounded around food. Just the fact that they're doing it is influence enough. Like if you have friends where like you meet up once a week, or coworkers you go out to happy hour with, just being in that presence is going to make it very, very hard for you to not do the same thing, because it's herd mentality. It's primally hardwired into you to go with the herd. Not only that, but you add FOMO. You think you're missing out if you're not also having a cocktail. You think you're missing out if you don't also order something super unhealthy off the menu. So those two things, baby, you are not strong enough yet to withstand that. So my point here is, one, this is a separate conversation. I would reduce the number of times that you're going out to eat if you are trying to lose weight, change your behavior. But two, in that situation, and even before you enter the situation, I don't want to be somebody who's easily influenced by the people around me. I don't want to be someone who's easily influenced by the average person, because I don't want to be the average person. Average today was below average a long time ago, but slowly but surely the scale has slided to accommodating what was below average, and now it's average. When you look at the amount of calories that people consume has increased grossly. The average health status, the average weight, all these different things. I don't subscribe to that. I don't want to be like that. So I am not somebody who's going to be easily influenced by that crowd. I'm not missing out on anything. I can still have fun and enjoy the conversation without having a cocktail in my hand. I can drink a Diet Coke and be just as satisfied. So number one, your identity has to shift. Okay. Number two, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, you have to set higher standards for yourself. Your standards are what will dictate your identity. I do this because this is my standard. I go for a walk every day because I'm the type of person who needs to move more. I'm a healthy human. There's a certain amount of movement that humans need to get every single day to maintain optimal health. We are not creatures that are meant to be sedentary. You're not a sloth, right? It's like the first creature that comes to mind that's meant to be sedentary. You're not a turtle, a tortoise. You're a human, okay? If you never let your dog out to run around and you never took your dog for a walk and this poor creature was just stuck in this house all day long, that would be considered animal neglect. You are literally neglecting yourself when you don't move more. So my personal standard is a standard of movement. I have a standard of how many calories I eat. I have a standard of how many meals I eat. Those are my standards. My goal is not to achieve that. I don't consider that a goal. I consider that a standard that I abide by. Goals are important, yes, but standards are more important because you can negotiate with the goal sometimes. You can't negotiate with your standards. So one of the biggest pitfalls I see women fall into when they start a journey, there's like these very consistent time periods that will derail people. And one of those time periods is once you really start to see some results. Maybe you're 5 to 10 pounds down, your clothes are fitting looser. I call this getting cocky because I've been there plenty of times before. You start feeling good about yourself. You're in a better mood. You feel better in your clothes. You feel more attractive. Okay. It makes it a little bit easier for you to start taking some plays off and going back to some of your old habits, because in the back of your mind, or even in the front of your mind, you're like, oh, it's okay. I lost 10 pounds. I can handle this. What do you mean? You now have a 10-pound buffer that you can gain back and be fine because you were fine 10 pounds heavier. So you start getting cocky once you start feeling a little bit better about yourself, and then you start taking plays off. That's having low standards for yourself. Your standard should be, I'm doing this because the type of person I want to be does these things. Again, back to your identity. So your standards and your identity are tied together because your standards drive your identity. Your goals, as ironic as it sounds, your goals don't affect your behavior. Having a goal doesn't mean your behavior is going to change. Setting new standards means your behavior will change because wherever your standards are is what forms your identity as a person, right? And this goes beyond fitness when it comes to personal standards. This transcends every area of your life. This is about, people who are functional, people who are organized, people like those are not things that I naturally had in me, by the way. I always grew up as a messy kid. Your personal standards across all areas of your life will improve with your fitness, and they kind of have to improve because the standards that you set for yourself are going to change your level of fitness. It's going to change your weight, the behavior that dictates your weight, rather. Those are going to impact other parts of your life too. This is why people, whenever they make a big transformation and they're able to see the transformation through, they lose a lot of weight. I was just talking to a new client this morning who already lost 100 pounds on her own, 100 pounds on her own. She decided last year to start tracking and she kept doing it. Well, that means she set a new standard for herself. And she started, even if she wasn't consciously thinking that, she set new standards. She abided by those. So it wasn't the goal of losing the weight. Maybe that really pushed her into making the change. The goal just serves as a catalyst for change. It is not the most reliable thing to maintain the change in your behavior. The most reliable focus you can have, the most reliable variable, is to focus on setting new standards for yourself. Because again, it shifts your identity. That's what shifts your behavior, and your behavior is what will determine the outcome. So stop thinking on just the goals themselves. What are your new standards? The third thing that you should focus on, you need to learn how to tolerate discomfort. And that only comes with practice. People who can't tolerate discomfort well have a very hard time adhering to the plan. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and the people who completely follow the plan from day one. I have some clients who start and they immediately start following the plan. You would think this is most people. It's not most people, because my goal is to teach people how to change their habits. But anyway, people who just follow the plan inherently, they don't get stressed out. They have stressors. I can think of multiple people off the top of my head who've experienced grief, who experience a dramatic shift in their life. I have a client who adopted her niece and nephew. She already has 3 of her own children. I have multiple clients who work in the medical profession, nurses, etc., who work 12-hour shifts, 4 or 5 nights a week. They have changing shifts. All of the things, all of the stressors that might be preventing you from adhering to the plan. I have plenty of clients who have all of those different stressors, yet they follow the plan. And I've noticed they don't let themselves get stressed out. They approach an obstacle, a stressor, with an objective mindset. It's not, well, this isn't going to work because of this thing. And like they start overthinking the problem. They're like, okay, how do I navigate this problem? They're problem solvers by nature. Problem solvers can tolerate discomfort well because their goal is to solve the problem, not to avoid there being problems to begin with. You're going to have problems. You're going to have obstacles. You're going to have things that make you uncomfortable. On the smaller end of the scale, a point of discomfort is having to track your macros on the weekends, having to track your food when you go out to eat, and you don't really want to do that because you're in the mindset to have fun and you want to eat what you want to eat. You don't want to know what the calories are, so you don't want to log it. You don't want to log the bad food, what you call bad food. That's a point of discomfort. It's uncomfortable to be met with reality of how many calories you consumed at this meal. It's uncomfortable to step on the scale the week after Christmas and see that the weight has gone up. And that's going to make you freak out. That's uncomfortable. If you can learn to tolerate discomfort by just having that grit that makes you stick with the plan despite how you feel, then you are going to achieve actual change. That's one of the core habits here, we'll call it a mental habit. Mental resilience. It's one of the most important variables in this whole process. 100% of my clients who derail from the plan, it's always stress. It is always stress. How you let stress dictate your behavior. I'm not the type of person who lets stress dictate my behavior. My standard is to stick with the plan despite feeling stressed out, despite not feeling like I'm in the mood to do this thing. I'm not in the mood to do this. Or I didn't work out first thing in the morning. I don't like working out at night. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. Listen, I'm one of those people. Okay. I do not like working out in the afternoon. But if I'm looking at my week and I've already used my rest days, right? Because like my rest days change. I'll train 5 days a week right now, 4 to 5 days a week. And beginning half of my week is the busiest, right? So I might use those as rest days. So if I've already used up my 2 rest days on Monday and Tuesday, and I have 5 more days left in the week, and I have 5 workouts to get, I'm working out all those days. Whether I screw myself over and don't do it in the morning or not, it's going to get done. Again, because that's my standard. So work on tolerating discomfort. And again, the only way to do that, if you're like, well, how do you anticipate discomfort, expect it, plan out mentally how you're going to handle that. Look at your week, plan things out. My busy moms, if you know what your week is going to hold, you know what games you have to go to, you've got the game schedule, you know what work obligations you have coming up, why are you not using forethought to plan that out? I've gotten lots of check-ins from people, lots of messages from clients over the years that they were not able to hit their macro goals because they had to go to their kid's game. And I'm like, Number one, I acknowledge that that is an obstacle. Number two, didn't you know that game was going to happen at that time on that day? Don't you have the game schedule? Why did you not prepare? You're blaming this schedule. You're blaming your schedule when the truth is it was your lack of preparation and your lack of foresight that led you to derailing. Because I have been tracking my macros consistently in this stint since the end of May. There have only been like 2 weeks in the time frame that I didn't track. One I was in Cabo, the other I was in Ibiza. I've had lots of things. I don't have kids that go to games, but I have my husband's work events, his obligations, travel, flights, car travel, doesn't matter what it is. I still track my macros the entire time. I knew those trips were coming, so I planned food to bring with me. I planned my macros for the day. I thought, okay, well, I can bring this. I have this in the airport. We'll have this before I leave the house. I'll have that number of macros. I might even eat more at breakfast, right? I'll have to eat less later. Then I don't need to eat on, for the next 4 hours. I'll be fine. I'll be there by then. I can have lunch when I get there. I can bring rice cakes. I can bring English muffins. I can bring protein powder. You can prepare for stuff like that. So before you even worry about how you're going to tolerate the discomfort of scheduling conflicts, why don't you prepare for it in advance? Also anticipate that you're not always going to be in a good mood. Being in a good mood is not a prerequisite to doing the work, yet people treat it that way. You had a bad day at work. It was a really emotional day. Something really bad happened. Someone pissed you off at work, whatever. You come home and then you're like, I don't feel like cooking dinner. I'm not in the mood for that. I'm just going to eat girl dinner instead and drink some wine. Talk about a low tolerance or discomfort. All you're doing is you're training yourself that every time I'm stressed, I eat, which you probably already aware if you are someone who stress eats. Okay, so why do you keep doing it? Don't give yourself, here's a side note to the list I'm going through here. Don't even give yourself the option in those situations of derailing. Stop keeping snacks in your house. I don't know how many times I've said this to people. I don't keep snacks in the house for good reason, because I know myself. And while I do have self-control, I do have discipline, I'm not completely infallible. A day will come where I am just sent sideways and maybe I forget to eat a meal, maybe whatever. If it's there, I'm giving myself the opportunity to eat it. I'm making it too easy for myself. If you want to break a habit, this is also in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Throw a wrench in the process. Make it harder for you to even reach for those things. So again, that comes back to having a higher standard for yourself in the standard for the food you keep in your house and what you buy from the grocery store and spend your money on. But if you can't tolerate discomfort, dude, you are going to have a very hard time with self-development and achieving any kind of goal. This is a prerequisite. Number 4, you might not be expecting this. Read more. Consume more material. I have amassed a lot of knowledge in the last, how old am I going to be? 37? Almost 18 years of being into health and fitness seriously and really wanting to understand how the body works. It started with wanting to understand fat loss. And that was an enigma to me at one point in time. Now it's just so simple. I'm like, why did I overcomplicate this? Everything I researched came down to fat loss and building muscle and, changing your body. Of course, like most people who get into fitness, I was driven by my superficial goals. But the more I learned about how the body worked, the more I realized how many different behaviors go into producing the most optimal result. And it's not to say that it's very complicated. It's just now I understand all the different variables that determine the outcome of my goal. That's not just hit your macros, move more, hit your training session. Yes, at a foundational level, that's the list, right? But beyond that, the food that you choose is not just about whole, unprocessed, or healthy, unhealthy. It's also the timing of those nutrients in your day. When's the best time to have carbs? What does insulin do? What does it mean to be insulin sensitive? What does it mean to have a healthy metabolism? Can you even speed up your metabolism? Side note, you can't speed it up. You can optimize your metabolism to what is healthiest. What is inflammation? I just started, and yes, I got certified, I have education through the Paula Strength Institute, I did several other certifications through different companies. I've taken lots of education, but a lot of the knowledge that I have gained is from my own research, looking through peer-reviewed articles, looking on PubMed, finding reliable sources of information, starting to follow certain coaches who put out really, really good information. And that started with, there's this website called tnation.com, T-Nation, it stands for Testosterone Nation. Sounds kind of douchey, but it's not. It has been around for like 20 years, if not longer. It is such a great resource of articles. They're all referenced, so you can go to the research articles. They're linked there because they cite them. All these different coaches who are just so experienced, so knowledgeable. And I just started learning by reading these articles and then following them on social media later on. Because I started researching this stuff before Instagram. And then, of course, I find those coaches and I see the information they put out. So my point is, the reason I know all this information is because I sought it. I looked for it. And if you're only just scrolling through fitness content on Instagram to learn from other people based on what they look like, that's not always reliable, because just because someone looks really good doesn't mean they know anything about what produced that. It doesn't mean that they're a great coach. It doesn't mean they're a great educator. You got to look for the right people and pay attention to the things that they say. Layne Norton is an example that comes to mind first. I question his approach sometimes, and how aggressive he is in social media. However, I do also like it too. I mean, it's controversial, which I'm sure helps his views. And sometimes he's rightfully angered by the misinformation that's on the internet, and a lot of the fads that are pushed, things that you might think are a really great idea for you, like Layne Norton, Dr. Layne Norton, he's a PhD, really great person to follow. Christian Thibodeau, and I can't spell his last name off the top of my head, but he's a strength and conditioning coach, and incredible information. He's written tons of really great articles. I mean, there's just so many coaches. John Meadows, he passed away a few years ago, very sadly. He was very young, but he was a bodybuilder and a bodybuilding coach and just a wealth of knowledge. His nickname is Mountain Dog. Mountain Dog Diet is like one of his approaches. But anyway, you want to develop a healthy hunger for knowledge. You want to know. You want to know what's going on inside the body. You want to know how your metabolism works. You want to understand all the things that you hear people talk about on social media, all these influencers. When you learn the information yourself and it's out there, then you become impervious to bullshit. Because I look at things on social media that people talk about, and I'll find a post of someone making some egregious claim, and I'll go look at the comments and people are eating it up. And I'm like, nobody knows this is bullshit. And it's wild to me. So when you learn the information, then you can't be lied to. You can't be misled. So one piece of advice I have with that, though, is if you really want to get to the root of the information, first start with tnation.com and go search their archives for any article on any topic that you want to read. There's just thousands of articles on there. But go look at the articles that are linked at the bottom of the article, and you're probably not going to be able to read it, okay? It took me a long time to be able to decipher some of these because there's just so much scientific jargon. What you can do now with ChatGPT is copy and paste the link to the article into chat and say, explain this research study to me in layman's terms. And it will do that to you. It will do that for you. So that way you can actually understand the information that's in it firsthand. You're getting it from the source. But then the other thing that comes with research articles is just the question mark of who funded this research, who were the researchers. Not that you're going to know researchers, but that comes back to who funds it. Is it done on humans? Is it done on mice? How many times has this particular study been done repeatedly with the same outcome? That's the only time that information is truly reliable. Data is not always totally reliable. My whole point, I'm getting off on a side tangent here, is if you truly want to change this year, become insatiable for knowledge. That's why, I do 2 different group coaching calls each week for my clients. And I say this to every single new client who gets started. The people that I work with, the women who get the best results, the fastest, are also the women who get on my calls every single week. Whether you make them live or you watch the recordings later on, it is those people who stick with it. And it's a combination of things. It's one, once you learn the information, you can't unlearn it. And you don't know what you don't know. So you'll take things away. They'll take things away that they never had heard before, had never been explained to them in a way that they understood. So it does change your behavior inherently. But there's also a lot to be said for what you consume comes out of you. When you are consistent, that's why I put the calls on Mondays and Thursdays to give them 2 points, start the week strong, and then, before wrapping up the week, let's make sure we get a good boost. But when you consume it, it does change your behavior. It's a lot like, I'm a Christian. And one of my personal goals I've been working on that I have definitely progressed towards, I have not completely achieved this yet, is completely controlling my tongue, controlling my language, thinking before I speak, especially if it's in if Mike and I are bickering or arguing or whatever. I really want to have control over what comes out of my mouth. I have ultimate control over what goes into my mouth, but I want to be able to control my words. I want to stop cussing. And I have learned that if I consume content, material, movies, music, whatever, with cussing in it, it comes out of me. If I abstain from listening to those things, it's a whole lot easier to control my language. It's like being around people who cuss, being around people who operate a certain way. Again, you're going to operate like that. So the more that you surround yourself with particular material, the more it will come out of you. If you want to become a more fit person, you got to put yourself in a community of fit people, whether that's digitally or in real life. You need to be surrounded by what you want to become. It's the best way to influence your own behavior is to surround yourself by what it is you want to become. And the last one, my suggestion to you is that if you truly want to transform into somebody who operates differently, who thinks differently, who has a different life experience, you should build a relationship with God. And for a long time on social media, and this prior, of course, to me really focusing on my relationship with God, but even once I really started focusing on what does it even mean to know God, consuming more scripture, really trying to understand God's character, and what does it even mean to understand God's character? Before all that, the thought had occurred to me before of talking more about my faith on social media, but I had this imposter syndrome. And then once I really started building a relationship, I just felt called to talk about it more, of course, because Jesus says, go out and make disciples of all nations. And I always had this thought, and I even said this, I'm not going to push religion on people. And I'm not. I don't believe that you should push religion on people. So I'm not trying to push on you that you should become Christian, that you should think the way that I think. But what I am going to do is just share my testimony with you, okay? And my personal testimony with this, in the difference that building a relationship with God has made in my life, I have always struggled on and off my whole life with depression. From the time I was a teenager on. And of course, as a teenager, you think, and your parents say it's oh, it's hormones, you're in puberty, it's your period, whatever. And then it was just this massive up and down. I at one point thought I was bipolar, manic depressive. I was diagnosed with depression years ago. And it completely had a stronghold on my life because when my depression was the worst, I was just in a freeze state. I was not thinking about eating healthy. I was not moving my body. My work was struggling. In those low, everything in my life would struggle. And I felt like a victim to my own brain. I was is there some chemical imbalance? Do I have a mental condition? I tried Lexapro. I tried Wellbutrin. I've tried therapy, which I, by the way, huge advocate for therapy because again, I think that you should want to learn about your body and learn the information. You should also want to learn about your own brain and, learn to analyze your behavior and why you act the way that you act. So I do believe in that, although that wasn't a fix to my depression. Having a therapist didn't keep me from becoming depressed. It didn't fix those things. The only thing that completely got rid of it was God, was Jesus, having a relationship with the Lord. It's wild, the sense of peace that I have because of having a relationship with God. You'll hear Christians say, give it to God. Whatever you're facing, just lay it at his feet, give it to God. And that, I didn't really always understand what that meant. It truly just means whatever your issue is, whatever you're struggling with, if it's alcohol, if it's drugs, those are extreme examples. if it's gossip, if it's negative thoughts, if it's whatever, just stop trying so hard to fix it yourself and be like, God, I need your help. I can't do this. It does lift a weight off of your shoulders because as humans, and especially those of us in the fitness world, we're so used to being able to solve our own problems. If you're a problem solver, especially like I was talking about before, you are used to being somebody who can fix things and you want to fix yourself. And what the gospel teaches us is that you can't completely fix these things. There's a void in you. And the only thing that fills that void is God. It's the only thing. It's the only thing that got me to this point and affected literally everything in my life. Once I started getting into relationship with God and learning what that meant, and that influenced my husband because I wanted to go to church. I wanted to go to Bible study. He was not spiritually there himself, but he was like, yeah, I'll go with you. He was supportive. But being in that environment and meeting people who share their own testimonies with him. And again, my parents are Christian. I grew up going to church, but I was always like a lukewarm Christian. I've never had anyone in my life try and like force, change on me or force different things on me. So I didn't force it on Mike. I just told him what I wanted to do for myself. And that affected him too. Like our relationship has never been better. Granted, we've been together for 4 years, but we definitely struggled a bit in the beginning because my views have also changed of like, what is my purpose? What truly fulfills me? I have a much stronger mission in life now than just trying to make money, trying to be fit, trying to achieve, earthly things. My goals are completely beyond that, which also helps me not always take my problems so seriously. When you have a higher purpose and you have higher goals and you have faith that God's going to take care of you. God taking care of you doesn't mean that he's a magic genie and he's going to prevent you from feeling pain or the consequences of your choices or, testing you. Like scripture does not promise us an easy life, but he promises us rest and peace. And it's just incomprehensible. When if you're somebody who has experienced this firsthand yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I just no longer battle myself. That was one of the biggest things that kept me back to the fitness conversation, that kept me in that yo-yo cycle for so long, was depression. It was depression. I mean, I've had some shameful lows, eating my feelings, getting into, falling into gluttony, falling into just laziness, mess, all of these things that grieve the Holy Spirit. And now that I have the Holy Spirit about me and I pray more consistently throughout the day, and prayer is not this like performative, like always get on your knees and like Heavenly Father, the Lord's Prayer. It's just like literally having a relationship is like you got God with you all the time. I'm struggling with this thing in front of me. I'm struggling with that thing. No prayer is too small. Like, dude, life is just different. It literally feels like I'm living a completely different life than I used to. So I'm going to tack on one bonus thing that I didn't plan on talking about. But as I'm discussing this and sharing my thoughts with you on how to truly change this year, your environment really matters a lot. And that thought just came to me when I was saying that I feel like I'm living a completely different life than I was before. I was at one point in time in an environment that was just not good for me. It was an environment that was good for some people, but it was not good for me. I did not completely fit the mold of this environment. I was in a relationship that didn't fit me. We were unequally yoked. We got along fine until the end. We fought all the time, but like foundationally, like our beliefs didn't fully align. So it was an unequally yoked. But the environment of my relationship at that time, the environment of my work life at that time, what I was working towards, I was so money focused, and it was just not good for me. When I changed that environment, it was a very, very painful process. And that sent me into like the worst depression I've ever been in my life. But like in the same year, I broke off that relationship. I left that job and I loved it there as well. I loved that job, but I just didn't fit. I didn't fit the environment. It changing my whole environment changed my life. That was right before I started focusing on a relationship with God. And that's been getting stronger since then. But I do believe at this point that God will remove you from situations that are preventing you from knowing Him. He'll change things, and it will probably be a painful process. But if you are currently in a situation that is making you miserable and there's nothing you can do to change, what the situation looks like, if it's something you can change and you've been miserable, like a job, and you've been miserable there for a long time, you can change your situation. You might not think that you can. You might have what's called the sunk cost fallacy. This can exist in your relationship or your job. I've been here I've invested so much time into this. I have to stay here. I've spent so much whatever on this, time, money, etc. Usually with job and relationship, it's time. I've been in this for so long. I have to see it through. No, you don't. If you're miserable, if it doesn't work, like, dude, you get one life. You get one life. You deserve to live a life that you enjoy. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be happy all the time. It doesn't mean you're going to be hunky-dory all the time. Back to scripture. Scripture doesn't promise you happiness. Jesus doesn't say, I promise you will be happy all the time. He promises you peace and rest. And peace is having faith through really hard times that things will work out, that it will work out. But my point is, change your environment if it is making you miserable. If it's a relationship, if it's your job, if it's where you live. I love Missouri. I lived there for a very long time, but I love Texas more. And I feel a whole lot happier being here in Texas. And every single day that I leave my house and I drive around, I'm like, thank God I live in Texas. Thank God I live in Texas. I am so much happier here. This fits me more. So you can do anything. You might not think it's possible, but you can. But this was episode 1 of the Tough Love Club. I hope that this a little bit of tough love for you was beneficial. I hope it brought you value. If you like this information, if you want to see more of these types of podcasts, just make sure you like, subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And you can always interact with me. If you want to leave comments on this post, if you want to reach out to me on Instagram, ask questions, if there's ever anything that you want to hear me discuss, I put this on social media all the time. I want this to be valuable for you. And that means I want to talk about the things that you want to hear. I'm going to talk about the things you need to hear, but you can always reach out. So thanks, guys, and I will catch you next time.